All right, no days off. We are not at the facility today. The 49ers are not practicing, but we're going to sit here and talk about them. Brandon Aiyuk, Brock Purdy, everything else. Friend Mike Silver is back in the house. Mike, how's it going?
Good, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm recovering after many long days out at the facility, and we are now officially in the dog days, right? The dog days of August. And there's
Yeah.
nothing crazier than a long portion of training camp being in July, but it seems that every year it cuts further into July than the year before.
Yeah. I mean, I think preseasons will ultimately start to look different. We're talking about a scenario with 18 regular season games eventually and probably two preseason games. Then you hear 19, 20, whatever happens. As you know, coaches tend to like the joint workouts more because it's a controllable situation in terms of evaluating players. I think you'll see a trend toward that and away from at least the three preseason game model. But in the meantime, they still call it training camp. I mean, I can't even tell you how different it is from what I experienced as a young beat writer starting in 1989 in the dog days of Rockland, California, where it was always hot and there was a lot going on.
2 days, right?
Yeah, 2 days pads hitting. On a positive note, journalistically, we got apartments up there because it was 5.5 weeks long, basically, and players were just on a campus at Sierra College, and so you just had a lot more interactions with them that were not controlled. Cafeteria, walking to and from places. I used to go in the pool behind the locker room, and Joe Montana would be messing around on the high dive, and it's kind of how I got to know him on a more human level. So there was that. The practices were much more physical. And by the way, I understand there are good reasons not to do this in terms of preparing people to play football, but back then the salaries weren't as high, so you didn't have people who spent the entire offseason grinding and staying in shape. Some of them had jobs even still. So, people tended to come back in worse shape. And then there was the old, let's beat it out of them in the heat, which is not physiologically a great idea. But, you did find out who could stand up to the physicality of the NFL a little earlier. And, so it would be two a day, and then the day in between, two a day every other day. And then the off days were big morning padded practice. And then in the afternoon, it was a special teams practice. So if you played special teams, every day was 2 a days.
So I'm really proud of the segue that I'm about to deliver. Sierra College, that's where the 49ers used to hold training camp in Rockland. It is the alma mater of Brandon Aiyuk.
Oh, very well
we
played. I didn't even see that one coming.
Yep.
Very good.
Reno native, cross Donner Pass for community college ball. Ben Noonan was his coach there at Sierra College long after the 49ers had training camp there, but probably I think they use an artificial turf field now. So it's probably a different field. But yeah. Brandon Aiyuk first made some waves at Sierra College, and then he was recruited to Arizona State. Then he was drafted by the 49ers, and now everybody wonders, is he going to re-sign with the 49ers? Are they make him play on the fifth-year option? What's going to happen? It's something that we have to address before we get into your Brock Purdy article, because it's the rumor of the minute, or the rumor of the past 24 hours. We saw Brandon Aiyuk on the field yesterday. He was hugging Kyle Shanahan. He was shaking hands with John Lynch. But at least as far as I've heard, there is no substantive news of any contract agreement being reached. And that's all I really know or can say about that at this point.
Yeah, same on my front. And I do expect it to get done. Once he reported to camp a week after it came out publicly that he had requested a trade, I felt that was a sign that one way or the other, it's getting done. Now, he could end up just playing on the fifth year for $14.1 million. I think it's much more likely that he'll end up taking a long-term deal. And maybe that handshake and all that, maybe they fought through an obstacle. maybe on money, and now they're getting into structure because it is complicated, as you know. You've got, how long is it going to be? What are the guarantees? When does the guaranteed money hit? The 49ers like to do that weird structure where basically they can shop around for your replacement and decide if they want to keep you. And then if they don't want you, turn you out of the cold at a less advantageous time after the start
The
of
April 1st date, right?
Yeah. So, it's been hard. Bosa, Kittle, some people have successfully fought against it. It's been hard. So I think there's all of that. And, let's face it, the wide receiver market's been tricky since the season ended, and it got even weirder the other day when DJ Moore and the Bears did a deal. Now he had a good year last year, but I look at DJ Moore and the Bears and I'm like, they just traded for Keenan Allen, who, by the way, wants a new deal and has been one of the most productive players at the position for a long time. And they drafted Rome Odunze, who is considered possibly a transcendent talent. DJ Moore might be your number 3 at the way this thing evolves, and yet they paid him,
$27.5, I think.
Yeah, marquee money. So Aiyuk, who after the season ended, you thought, well, he probably wants high 20s. They probably want mid 20s, but he could probably bridge that gap. But then all the stuff started to happen, including Justin Jefferson, way above. But I don't think anyone thinks Aiyuk is Justin Jefferson. But guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who are kind of a slot, but a highly productive slot, versus not just a slot, but not your classic number 1 receiver. Jalen Waddle, a number 2 receiver, Devonta Smith, a number 2 receiver. The market's just been a little weird. So I can understand if it's tricky. I do believe that one will get done, and probably it'll be a long-term deal. And then we'll know that Deebo Samuel, in all likelihood, is gone after this season.
Well, yeah, and that I'm not as sure about that with Deebo Samuel, but I do know that the 49ers want to circle the wagons after 2024 and figure things out. That for sure. I think it's in their interest, though, to let as much as possible play out on the field this year so they could gather as many data points before, even on Brock Purdy, right? That's the most high pressure, interesting one because he's delivered elite football for a season and a half. If he delivers elite football for another season, so it's 2.5 seasons by the time this negotiation comes up, then it's totally fair to talk about $60 million per year. But if Brock takes a step back this year, all of a sudden that opens up another can of worms. It's like, okay, are you going to be paying him that B-level money? Where is that going to fall in? It's fascinating, the crossroads that we're standing at right now. And I think we have every reason to believe that Purdy's going to continue to play really good ball, but that doesn't take the pressure away from him, from Deebo Samuel, who's in effect in a contract year, even though he has 2 years left on his deal. And as we speak right now, Brandon Aiyuk is gearing up for a contract year because he hasn't signed that new deal. So he's on a $14.1 million contract. So option A, or I'm going to list the options, not necessarily in the order of their likelihood, but there is an option where 49ers say, we can't meet you at the price that you want. You're not coming down to our price. Fine. You're under contract. Play for $14.1 million this year. Team holds the cards in that regard, right? Option B, Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers find a agreement. And I think the issue is that the 49ers have a very specific cost that obviously Brandon Aiyuk views as a low offer that they think they can comfortably fit into their larger salary cap picture over the next 4 years. Aiyuk has other ideas, and seeing Justin Jefferson blow the market away, seeing all this other stuff in the receiver market with Amon-Ra St. Brown has helped reinforce those other ideas in his mind, right? So that's the gap that you have. And I think it's simple. I don't think option C, the trade that everybody likes to talk about in Pittsburgh, I don't think that that's nearly as appealing to anybody, including the 49ers, who are the team that would have to execute it, right? But between options A and B, the way, if they're going to bridge that gap in between what Aiyuk wants and what the 49ers are offering, it's going to take somebody moving, right? Because right now, there obviously has been a gap between those two parties.
I do see the trade thing as a little nuanced because they did draft Ricky Pearsall. He obviously, they believe, is their president future as well. So if Aiyuk takes the fifth-year option, then it's kind of a Hunger Games thing with him and Debo, and I would also put Kittle into that mix, who they could feel is overpaid after this year potentially and has played a lot of football. But if Ricky Pearsall's out there balling, healthy first of all, and balling, and it feels weird with Aiyuk and or Debo, and targets are shrinking, and if Aiyuk gets his deal done, I'm only talking about Debo. If he's on the fifth year, I'm talking about either. But then the Steelers come calling. The vibe feels weird. You know you're moving on after the season, and you can get something for, say, Debo before the trade deadline. Then I think it's back in play. Mm-hmm. In that specific scenario. On paper, you want to load up and do everything you can to win this year. If it evolves to a point where they feel like it's not that great having all three for whatever reason, and they'll be fine with Pearsall on one of them, and they can get something, then maybe they do that. So back to Purdy. The worst thing, it's great if you have that golden ticket and you got someone on a rookie deal and you can load up around him as they have. It's great if you have Patrick Mahomes and he's transcendent and he'll cover up all the corresponding cap, related weaknesses for, till the end of time. The middle ground is what you want to avoid. And that's hard, right? When you get in that Tony Romo, Jake Cutler, guys who are really good, but not good enough to cover up for that. And so when you talk about where they'll be with Purdy after this year, I think Kyle Shanahan's already decided for all intents and purposes. He overcame the UCL. So it's in all likelihood, they're going to feel just fine committing to Purdy. But by point of comparison, look at the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love waited.
Half the season.
Yeah, then he had a lousy first half of the season. Then he got hot. To his credit, looked really, really good. Went into Dallas and blew doors in that playoff game, looked great, and played really, really well at Levi's for most of the playoff game. Though I will remind people that with a winnable situation, on first down, he made an unconscionable throw, right?
He pulled the Brett Favre against the Saints. The same exact play. It was crazy.
Yeah, and it was first down. It wasn't desperation time. So I'm rooting for Jordan Love. I admire the kid. I am wowed by some of the things he's done, and I think he's in a great situation with Matt LaFleur. I'm a little surprised that the Packers felt so emphatic and so comfortable going all in on that contract. And I know, you're a product of your experiences. You had Favre, Rodgers waited, you had Rodgers. Maybe it'll happen yet again and Jordan Love will be that great. I'm still a little skeptical on that one. And I'm surprised that they just went for it when they didn't necessarily have to yet.
From week 8 or week 9 onward, if you looked at all the advanced efficiency stats last year, it was Purdy and Love at the top of the league, which made that divisional playoff matchup so compelling. And now you see fans arguing about it all the time, Purdy or Love. And it's funny because we talk about Brock Purdy just splashing onto the scene more recently. Love was obviously drafted before him, but it's Love, the guy who was paid earlier because he's eligible for it earlier, who has the smaller sample. So Brock Purdy samples, I would say smaller sample of good play. Brock Purdy's sample of good play is significantly bigger than Jordan Love's. And we'll see where it's at after this season. But you're right. It is a head scratcher. It is a risk. And the 49ers are headed to Lambeau Field this year, right before Thanksgiving. So we'll have something to write about entering
right after what you and I would agree is the ACC game of the year between our alma maters. And it's painful to say that ACC game of the year, but here we are.
At least they're playing it on the West Coast, but one of these years they'll host it in what's the name of the stadium in Charlotte? The house that Christian McCaffrey built. It was there before him, but hopefully we never have to see a Stanford Cal game played on the East Coast.
Yeah, that's when hell will freeze over. The only way I'll allow it is if it's in a playoff scenario, and I don't know that it's trending that way currently. That both our teams would reach the playoff or one of those marquee bowl games, but you never know.
So pardon me for not paying too close of attention, for becoming disinterested after this whole ACC switch, but how's the conference championship going to work? Are Cal and Stanford in the same divisions? They can't play each other in the title game?
It's a great question. I don't know that there are divisions. From what I can tell, it's a 17-team cluster with a word added on. And it's only an 8-game conference schedule, which now is weird for both of us. So, like Cal scheduled Oregon State as its 4th non-conference game in the middle of the season, I guess because it can, which I actually think is the right thing to do. I think Oregon State and Washington State should be our karmic, brothers at this point, because they're the ones who really got screwed even more than our alma maters. But everyone plays 8 games. It seems super weird and imbalanced. I'm sure Cal and Stanford will continue our tradition and play every year on that 3rd Saturday in November. But I actually don't know what happens. And I've always, laughed and just said, just try to win the conference and go where they send you. And I guess my Rose Bowl dream is dead. But, if we're ever, that would be a good problem to have if either or both of us were competing for any form of conference championship. And I'm probably wrong. There probably is an ACC title game. I just haven't seen divisions if they exist.
Well, thankfully we have the 49ers to cover to distract us from college football has become. You talked about Brock Purdy. You wrote an awesome article on Brock Purdy the other day. I thought it was an extremely unique interview in that Brock Purdy, over the first year and a half, I mean, he'd been cordial, fun guy to talk to, but we hadn't gotten what you got from him until a few days ago. And the headline, I think, is fitting. The quote in the headline comes from Brock Purdy, and he says, "I want to be dominant now." And we could talk about some of the other quotes in there, but that's the one that stood out to me. His desire to not only be dominant, but to go out and say it before the season, which is definitely something that wouldn't have happened before. Anyway, you sat down with Brock, you talked to him. What were your first impressions about the demeanor, about the confidence that was coming across? Because we could see it in the words, but I want to know what it sounded like and felt like from somebody actually talking to him.
Yeah, it's interesting because the delivery was very much what you and I would normally expect, right? I've said that when he puts the backpack on and the way he dresses, he looks like he's going to econ lecture at Iowa State. I mean, he could not look less like a guy talking like that. And I've always known that he has a strong sense of faith in his abilities, and that's come out. But it's almost one of those things where the delivery was so chill that I'm thinking, I think this is pretty good stuff. And then when I went home and transcribed it, I was like, oh, wow, like this, he said the words bloody mindset. I'm like, I don't think I caught that in real time or remembered it. So, yeah. And I will say this, he did spell out his version of dominance. And I think it will be different from what we would typically think. Like when we think dominant, we're thinking like Josh Allen, three guys hanging on him and he's going back across his body and ripping a 50-yard pass through the wind, doing some superhuman thing. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. He's saying when we get in a position to close out these games or to really get up on a team, I want to convert that 3rd down. I want to do exactly what my assignment is. I want to be right on time and keep the drive going, score the touchdown, end the suspense. And he referenced Tom Brady. So again, that's hyperbole. But if you think about the cool, ruthless efficiency with which Brady did a lot of those things, it didn't always hit you over the head. It was just, what hit me over the head was the mindset and man, he's trying to kill you even when he's up by 35 points. And when he's down, he's still thinking of a way to get you. So I think it's dominance, but not some sort of physical or statistical craziness. It's just ruthless efficiency that he's talking about.
I think I lost you, Mike.
Oh, you there, Dave?
Yeah, you're there. Good.
Yeah,
you said you were at the very end of your thought. You said you were talking about the type of dominance that Brock Purdy wants to administer.
It's not just physical dominance. It's ruthless, cold-hearted efficiency that he's referring to.
And Brady is exactly who you think of. You would often watch those Patriots games in their dynastic era, and they would kill their opponents with 1,000 paper cuts. Nothing was, oh my God, this is going to go on the Sports Center top 10. But at 2.5 quarters in, they're up by 24 points.
Yeah.
And it's because he was avoiding the negative plays and he was constantly churning forward. He was converting those third downs that you're talking about. I think one of the exciting things about Brock Purdy, though, is that he's got this physical upside that I think the NFC Championship game finally brought some people around to what he can do. His biggest physical strength to me is his base. I mean, when I think about a strong base, I think about Josh Allen. I think about Jalen Hurts. I guess he could squat 900 pounds. The media really pumped that one into everybody last year. And I think about Dak Prescott, right? Dak Prescott's got a strong base. Brock Purdy, and they're calling him Baby Bosa legs. He's always had that strong base. But remember the NFC title game when the corner came on the blitz, the DB blitz from Detroit, and Purdy just kind of had him on his back and threw him off and then was able to roll out, and he hit Kyle Juszczyk right near the sideline. That was a huge play in the third or the fourth quarter of that game. And I think that has allowed him that, and just the way he can move, the strength he has in the pocket, the way he can move. He's very quick in the first couple of steps. That's allowed him to, take a lot of what Brady was good at. Obviously, he's great with his mind, and he's not on that level yet. He's still trying to get better, but I think he's added his own flair that we did see in the playoffs last year.
Yeah, and I think we maybe underplayed what an epic comeback that was. I mean, the signature pass went off a corner's face mask. There was a little bit of, and it happened fast, the comeback. But what Purdy did down 24-7 with his team getting dominated was exceptional. And I thought he had a pretty good Super Bowl too. He did not play well against the Packers. We talked about that. Part of it is he thinks the rain got in his head and whether to wear the glove or not. And part of it is he thought he was looking, in retrospect, he was looking for the big play when he didn't need to, when he should have been more patient, which is, young quarterback. Interesting. But yeah, I think, we're seeing a guy who he's got such a good sense in the pocket, moving, young Russell Wilson, when to move, when to throw, how to operate in the pocket. He obviously sees the game very well, but we might be missing the arm a little bit. And it's funny, we had a bunch of national people in this week at training camp, and we had Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, Charles Robinson, my old Yahoo colleague, among them. And I was standing with them, and I think it was Charles Robinson who just kind of looked at me and he said, I don't think I realized that Purdy's arm is like this. And I was like, yeah, dude, it's not, doesn't overpower you, but this guy, he makes throws. He puts the ball into places where it's like, whoa, and, he suffered a significant arm injury after that first season. And I think I went up to Brock after the Ram game last year. What was that, week 2, maybe? And that
was week 2. That's when he missed all those deep balls, right?
Yeah. And I said to him, I said, is it possible they made your arm stronger, bionic? And he laughed and he's like, nah, dude, come on. But I thought it was as live as I'd ever seen, if not more live. And, he definitely, if you go back and say, why was he not drafted till 262? Why did 32 teams blow this? Because obviously the 49ers blew it to the extent they didn't know. If they could go back and redraft, they'd take him 1 overall, right? But how did 32 teams not know this? And he just, I don't think it was the arm. The arm's not amazing, but the arm is definitely good enough. I think it was more just the stature and the, I'm sure his 40 time didn't, justify what he's able to do in terms of his nimbleness.
Yeah. So there's a couple things there. One, the 40 time does not correlate with his 10-yard split. That's right. One of the craziest discrepancies. When I went up and asked Brock Purdy about his 10-yard split last year, just in a casual conversation, because it's like a 1.55. and his 40 is like a 4.8 or 4.9. Dre Greenlaw is the locker right next to him, and Dre heard me, and Dre he is shocked. He's like, you have a 1.55 40-yard split. Why aren't you running a 4.4? So Dre Greenlaw asked Brock Purdy. So with that kind of quick, short area quickness, you would expect 4.4 speed over the 40. But for whatever reason, after like 2 or 3 steps, Brock's like a trailer gets hitched to him, right? Then he's starting to drag. He slows down considerably. So he's very quick in that short area, which is great for the quarterback position. But he's not the best. I'm going to scramble and run, all over the field. He's not going to be able to do what Steve Young did on some of those 49-yard touchdown runs for the 49ers, right?
Yeah,
but
he doesn't look like Lamar when he gets past that first level of the open field. It's
exactly. But combine, and then this is something that I learned from the people at Iowa State. His peripheral vision is masterful to a way that like they've measured it. They have different devices that they can use. So he's been able to combine his knowledge of where rushers are coming from, because he's a smart guy. He does his film study, but combine that with the peripheral vision, the reaction time, and then obviously the quick burst that's measured by that 10-yard split. And that's turned him into a quarterback that's actually very mobile for all that you need quarterbacks to be mobile for. And I think that's a really complicated formula. So I'm not really sure that the NFL saw that in a guy that was coming out of Iowa State that was fairly lightly recruited out of high school. So he wasn't quite on their radar. So nobody looked deep enough to figure out what he actually was like as a player. Because if you watch the college tape, he's actually doing a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. He's actually evading guys and doing all that too.
And winning.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was winning a lot of games. In Iowa State, they had never seen anything like that. So that was really important. But 2, I actually think as far as the arm goes, he made a big stride between the end of his college career and the start of his pro career, working with William Hewlett and Tom Gormelli in Jacksonville. Gormelli's like a sports science guy. Will Hewlett is a standard quarterbacks coach. Yeah. And it seems to me that he's doing excellent work there from a biomechanical level. And I think that he put on some velocity. And I think that he might have put on some velocity in each of the past 2 off seasons, working out there with those 2 guys in Jacksonville. So, a lot of people think that athletes are finished products at age 22 when they draft that. It's not the case. I mean, and I think in this case, we've seen some real physical development for Brock Purdy since he left Iowa State.
And then you throw in the swag. And, in my column, I was looking for an example from him because I'd heard that he's really taking charge much more. And in the second day of camp, they're running what's basically a jog through drill. And Deebo Samuel cuts the wrong way. And Purdy said, I'm yelling at him as the ball is leaving my hand. He obviously Deebo can take it. He's a professional and they're all trying to win. But, I think some young quarterbacks, even for all he's accomplished, would be a little intimidated by a Deebo Samuel. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Deebo's, when Deebo looks intense, he could be one of the more intimidating people I think we deal with. And you and I don't tend to get intimidated in those settings. But I could see how if you were in the heat of battle with him, that would be pretty gnarly. And, I think the fact that Brock feels comfortable doing that at this stage is pretty cool.
Has George Kittle told you the story of Brock in the huddle in that Tampa Bay game?
I think it's been written too. Did you write it? I think somebody wrote. Yeah.
I think I wrote it because I wanted to verify it before, but I verified it with Christian McCaffrey. I verified it with Trent Williams, who thought it was the funniest thing of all time. And I'm going to use the poor language here because
sure.
Because what I wanted to verify is that Brock Purdy said this, and so those of you don't want the bad language, you can mute it right now. But Brock gets in there against Tampa Bay, or it might have been against Miami. It was one of those 2. And George is goofing off. He's mouthing off in the huddle, and Brock is the quiet rookie, 3rd string, 4th string core, whatever he is. He's in the huddle, and all of a sudden, as George is goofing off and Brock is trying to hear the play, Brock goes, "Shut the fuck up, George." And all of a sudden,
I'm
George was like, oh, okay. And he snaps the attention. They go out, they dominate the game. Offense was awesome against Miami. It was awesome against Tampa. So whichever of those two games it was, it got everybody's attention. And the way that George talks about it now, he says that he likes to test rookies. He says that he likes to be a little bit of a clown in front of them. He likes to prank them. I think he tried to do something to Brock Purdy's locker. He tried to it was some Iowa State rivalry stuff. And Brock would have none of it. Like, he's like, nope, this is business. I'm not letting you haze my locker. And George, that really impressed George Kittle. So it was through events like that that he kind of stood up and grabbed leadership of the team right away. And I think that's notable, because so much of what Brock Purdy has done to become who he is in the 49ers hierarchy is not measured by what he's doing physically, right? It's how he's bringing together all of this great talent.
Yeah, and he did not come in playing along with that whole Mr. Irrelevant storyline. He was not into it. He came in like, oh, I'm going to be one of the best quarterbacks and make the team and get better. And then when I get my chance, I'm going to do great, because that's what's going to happen. And a lot of people, before they really saw him do anything in that locker room and in that huddle, were like, yeah, okay. Not like he was off-putting, but almost like this kid might be a little delusional. Like, this is the NFL, this is the 49ers. And then he started to do things in drills, and they were like, yeah. And then he did, we saw a couple of things in those preseason games, those second level throws, and he took some risks and drove his coaches crazy too, but you could kind of start to see it. But anyone who says that we believed, or the people in that huddle believed, he would do exactly what he did in the Miami game after Jimmy got hurt, and then right on, beginning with the Tampa game that first year, I mean, that was extraordinary. And he would have been off and running, but then to suffer a potentially cataclysmic arm injury in Philly with no guarantee that he'd be the same or be back in 6 months, let alone and bounce back from that. I think he had the 14th highest passer rating for a single season in NFL history. Last season, was an MVP candidate until Christmas, and took Patrick Mahomes to overtime in the Super Bowl. So I would be shocked if he's not in even better bargaining position a year from now. But like you said, he does have to put up with that risk. And in the old days, the rookie, he still would have had an issue in the old days, because contracts were kind of slotted. So even though the big high picks were getting way more money, pick 262 still wasn't getting much. The difference in the old days, pre-2011, is he could have already renegotiated and gotten something.
Yeah.
But now you're not even allowed to touch it till after season 3. And so probably the 49ers are getting, all things considered, the biggest contract bargain in NFL history this year in Brock Purdy.
$1 million cap hit when average salaries at the top of the market have increased to $55 million. I mean, it's unreal. It's really hard to wrap your head around how remarkable this story is. It is like it's been scripted for some kind of inspiration movie,
you see the American Underdog helmet behind me. So I was lucky enough to do a book with Kurt Warner after that 1999 season, the magical season. He wins the Super Bowl. He's Super Bowl MVP. He's regular season MVP. And the dude was stocking supermarket shelves, also in Iowa, by the way. I mean, it's one of the craziest stories ever. Wrote the book. In my opinion, it was made for Hollywood. In Hollywood's opinion, it also was, but 21 years later.
Yeah. So when they saw Brock Purdy, and then they're like, we got to make a movie about the first guy so we can write the sequel. The sequel is going to be called Mr. Relevant.
Yeah, right. So American Underdog hit the theaters 21 years later. I got to walk down the red carpet at Chinese theater, a total dream. And, I love the movie. It was pretty true to the book. And I'm very partial to that story. So I don't toss things around lightly, but I do think Purdy's story is the rare NFL story where we're in the same neighborhood. So if and when they do make a movie, I hope it doesn't take 21 years, but that's up to Hollywood.
Before the Super Bowl, I got to talk to Kurt. I got to talk to Dick Vermeil and Mike Martz because I wrote an article discussing the similarities and differences between Purdy, Warner, and those 49ers and the greatest show on turf Rams. And there are a lot of similarities, even from schematic perspective. Now, there were differences too, but I mean, you think about Marshall Faulk being Christian McCaffrey, right? The running back that can beat you in so many different ways. I guess Isaac Bruce and Brandon Aiyuk were talking about him during this show. Just Orlando Pace and Trent Williams. I mean, you had so many different pieces on that Rams offense that Mike Martz was able to create schematic advantages, and then he took advantage of Kurt Warner's brain. And obviously, Kurt Warner had a really good arm too. They were able to throw those digs at a deeper depth than anybody had ever thrown them before, and it just completely threw defenses off.
And the AstroTurf was so different. I mean, they were fast, and on that AstroTurf, they were insanely fast. Yeah, I mean, it's so funny as you're saying that. I'm thinking, I covered those teams very closely. I know Martz very well, and let me see if I could say this the right way. As different as the offenses are, Martz and Kyle's, and they're both, Martz was very advanced. Kyle is obviously probably the most advanced, and it's very different, right? But the similarity is they both would tell their quarterback, I will have a guy open. There will be an answer. Just do what the play dictates based on my genius, and it will bleep and work. Whereas, the Josh McDaniels of the world would say, you're going to adjust, and the receivers are going to adjust based on what the defense does, and you're going to decide what the right route will be based on that. Kyle and Martz, in very different schemes, would both say, no, I got this. I'm so smart that I've already got an answer. No matter what they do, someone will be schemed open. Just follow the damn progressions and put the ball where you're supposed to. And, and Kurt, one of the most accurate passers in history. The ball, it didn't look pretty. I don't think he ever threw a spiral, but man, it got there accurately. And, I covered Montana, so my standard is very high.
Hi. Well, and one thing I'll add to kind of bring this full circle, when I talked to Mike Martz, we talked for a long time, and he absolutely loves Brock Purdy. He said that he'll pop open film and he'll just watch Brock Purdy and the way that he makes decisions. And I mean, football people that know the quarterback position, there's something about Brock, and we've talked about a lot of the things about Brock that I think they like, but there's something that you can identify if you know what you're looking for as far as knowing how to play the position. Remember when they drafted him out of Iowa State? I think it's on the congratulatory phone call from Lynch and York and Shanahan to Brock Purdy. John Lynch said, we love the way that you play the position. Adam Peters kept on saying, we love the way that he played the position. And it's a very intangible thing, right? It's just, but those words mean something to football people. I think it's the collective experience of some of the traits that we're talking about.
And if you really go back and look at the context, he's the anti-Trey Lance in that he played for 4 years. He had all those big Power 5 experiences from the early in his freshman year. And so Trey Lance, who they love the makeup, they love the intelligence and the obviously the physical traits and the guy. And he's, very good guy, right? They loved all that, but they had to extrapolate as to what kind of player he might be because they just didn't have much of a body of work. Part of that was because of COVID. Part of that was because he was at a football factory and got thrown in, later. And, I think he'd run 1 2-minute drill in college, and the sample size was so little. And so to go from that, which obviously didn't work and could have, blown up the operation in most cases, and then, get a guy who had such different experiences coming in and so much more experience. It's really interesting how that played out. But Yeah, man. What a crazy thing that uh, you know, we knew it earlier, being around it. 49er fans, I think, know it earlier than around the league, but there's still a lot of people, media and fans around the football world that don't really get it. And you hear system quarterback or well, he's just got all those weapons around him and Kyle's offense is so good and all that's, fair points. But if you think that this is just some guy who got thrown in and is replaceable by just any old guy, you are not watching closely enough. And I don't think that's as much of a thing around here anymore. But certainly,
Remember last camp? Oh my God.
Oh yeah. But I think the Bay Area now knows and the 49er fan base now knows. But I would suspect that by the end of this season, everyone will know. And I keep coming back to people ask why. And I said the overvaluation of the draft and the cult of draft is part of it, in both in terms of how people view Purdy and how they view someone like Trey Lance. It's hard for people to let go of Trey Lance because he was drafted third and they traded so much to get him. And it's hard for them to say, wow, Brock Purdy might be that dude. He can't be. He was 262. And, it just takes a while for people to get over that. I mean, I think at some point it's harder with quarterbacks. At some point you look at Dre Greenlaw and go, yeah, I know he was a 5th round pick, but he's one of the best linebackers on the earth. Right. And at some point you look at, the counter to that, guys who go very high and have so much potential, and you just go, he's not getting it. He's not going to be that good.
I think this 49ers roster is a walking embodiment of the antidote to the cult of draft that you talked about. People worship draft order, but the draft, if you actually look at how it works and you look at the data of what it's produced, is a crapshoot. And if you look at the 49ers roster, George Kittle was a 5th rounder. Dre Greenlaw was a 5th rounder. Brock Purdy, obviously, Exhibit A, a 7th rounder, pick number 262. Fred Warner was a 3rd round pick. The draft is
Lenore.
And at the same time, Deommodore Lenoir, 5th round pick, and then go back and look to see how the most talented roster in football was built. At the very start, their very first 2 picks were 1st rounders on Solomon Thomas and Reuben Foster, who obviously both did not pan out for the 49ers. Mike McGlinchey was their 1st round pick in 2018. So they didn't hit on a second contract 1st round guy until Bosa in 2019, which was considered the surest.
You were going to hit on that one. Yeah.
Yes. Bosa's the one that's not, wasn't the crapshoot pick. That was the one you knew you're going to hit on. But everything else, even in the 1st round, is a big risk. And if you don't treat it that way, then you're not going to build a good roster. You have to throw as many darts at the wall as possible to hit some bullseyes. And that's what the 49ers have done.
You can and should do an entire episode just on running backs in the Shanahan Lynch era.
That too, because
we're now, it might be happening yet again. I mean, you go back to, they drafted Joe Williams was his name, but now it's Jeff Wilson Jr. and Raheem Mostert. Well, they drafted Trey Sermon. Well, it's Elijah Mitchell. Well, they drafted Ty Davis-Price. Well, actually, Jordan Mason's the better one. And, Garendo, who they really like, is hurt and may go on IR. I'm wondering if Cody Schrader, the undrafted guy, is going to sneak onto this team. It's almost predictable at this point. If you get a call for the 49ers on draft day or one of the draft days and you're a running back, you want it to be late or like as an undrafted free agent if they took a guy in the 3rd or 4th round based on history.
So what do you tell them? No, here's this character flaw that I have that you don't know about. Sign me later. Don't draft me.
Not in the 3rd, not in the 4th. No. But if you do that, don't bring in another running back after me. So it's going to be such a fun season. I'm looking forward to it. I do think these contract things will get resolved. Trent Williams is the one they absolutely have to get done. I think, likely Aiyuk will be a long-term deal, but I agree with you. I think a trade is very unlikely, and I think he'll be in the fold. And, it's not over after this year because the quarterback is so great, but this is your last time in the sweet spot with, you can pay everyone. Purdy's on a rookie deal. So it's going to be really fascinating to watch whatever happens. They got a real opportunity as they have the last few years.
Yeah, and they're going to try to take advantage of it. We wanted to give people a little bit of a preview into the first game, which always sneaks up on me. I know it's just the Hall of Fame game, so it's not going to be high level play or anything, but we do get to see those first kickoff, the new kickoff rules in effect. I don't know how much teams are going to show, but you do have to audition players, so that should be interesting here in a few minutes. I'll watch at least a quarter. Hopefully I can make it through more, but we'll see.
Well, I'll leave you with one story. So when I was at NFL Network, I went to Canton a number of years in a row to broadcast. And the year that the Packers were set to play the Colts in the Hall of Fame game, my sons had come along and my wife. My sons grew up Packer fans because of the Aaron Rodgers thing when they were young. And I thought, wow, what a great opportunity. They can go to the ceremony and then, maybe pregame, I'll be able to introduce them to some people. And that was the game where the field was all weird with the paint thinner and all that. And they ended up not playing the game because both the Colts and Packers decided this field is a disaster waiting to happen. So on one hand, my sons got to talk to, Tony Dungy and Aaron Rodgers and all sorts of, incredible icons for a long time because they were standing around on that field forever. On the other hand, I'll never forget my colleague Steve Weish coming up to me and going, "Hey, do you have a polo?" He meant the NFL Network issued polos that we would wear in the summer. I said, "No, but I'm wearing a polo." And he goes, "Do you have any makeup with you?" And I go, "Maybe a little." And he's like, "You and I are going live." And I think he and I were live for an hour and a half with limited, prep, very limited prep, and just talking about the madness that ensued. So that was way more of a memory for me than an actual preseason game would have been. And I will never forget the Hall of Fame game that wasn't.
Perfect. And you guys went live for an hour and a half. It got you ready to go live for 48 minutes on YouTube years later.
Yeah. And no makeup, blessedly. Yeah. So
no makeup this time.
Well, you and I will see way too much of each other. So that, I won't even say goodbye because I'll see you like in tomorrow. 10 seconds. But it'll be fun to see what happens this preseason. And we're hoping for a nice low injury preseason as always.
Hey, by the way, I'm going to see too much of you this year, but nice appearance on Netflix show on Receiver. Your Washington moment was in there. I thought that was cool.
I gotta say, such a weird thing when that happened. It was so flukish, and I was actually in a different tunnel and had to move because there was a medical emergency, and then just this happy surprise. But the moment that warmth washed over me is I was in the moment. I didn't know what was going on, but at one point I looked to my right and I saw Tracy Sandler with her phone getting the video. And then I thought, this is going to be on video. I didn't realize it would be on a Netflix show, but I knew it would get way more attention than it deserved. So perfect, like just the perfect person to be around. And there you have it.
That was awesome. Cool. Well, thanks, Mike, for joining. Everybody check out Mike's article in the San Francisco Chronicle on Brock Purdy. I want to be dominant, in quotes. That's in the headline. That one came out a few days ago. I think it says July 27th. So go check that out. Mike is doing a great job as always. Thanks, Mike, and we will see you tomorrow.
All right, Dave. Thank you.